The legal case for a massive toxic mine spill is complete. How much Utah will get for the Gold King mine disaster. Hello, I'm Richard Pyatt, and this is Legally Speaking. You may remember the pictures of the bright orange and yellow water flowing down Colorado's Animas and San Juan rivers into Utah and Lake Powell back in 2015. That water was in fact 3 million gallons of mine tailings from the Bonita Mine, full of arsenic and heavy metals. The pollution in that water was significant enough that Governor Herbert at the time declared a state of emergency to preserve health, safety, and welfare of citizens as well as the interests of Utah farms and businesses. Even though that blowout was an accident, the EPA admitted responsibility, and a settlement came after some real hard work by the Attorney General's office. The state received more than $7 million, and that final payment came recently here at the AG's office. Let's get some questions answered from Craig Anderson, the Director of the Environment and Health Divisions at the AG's office. Thanks for joining us today, Craig.
Thank you for inviting me, Rich.
So, Craig, exactly what happened back in 2015 with that mine?
Well, on August 5th, there were some EPA project managers and contractors who were at the Gold King mine in Colorado up in Silverton, and they had been investigating contaminated acid mine drainage that was accumulating in all of the mines in that mining district. There were approximately 40 mines in this area that all drained into the same area. And there were a number of mine shafts, tunnels, and other areas that had kind of permeated that mining district and contained a huge amount of water that had drained into the tunnels in the abandoned mines over the years. So EPA's plan was to drain the water in the accumulated mine tunnels, take that water and put it in settling ponds where the heavy metals that were in the water could settle out, and then retain that water at a treatment plant, treat the water, and release the treated water into a drainage known as Cement Creek. On August 5th, for whatever reason, the project manager on the scene and some of the contractors decided to excavate the rock and materials that had been used to block the mine at the Gold King mine. And after using the excavator to remove some of the material at the face of the adit, water started to shoot out of the top of the mine entrance, and then it immediately blew out, literally blew out all of the materials in the adit and released about 3 million gallons of water all at once.
Why was it orange and yellow? Because
the accumulated water caused an acidic reaction to occur, and that acid literally leached out iron, all kinds of other heavy metals, magnesium, and that turned, the iron primarily turned the water orange.
So it sounds like this was an oversight or an accident. But did the EPA take responsibility for that right away?
The EPA administrator at the time, Gina McCarthy, was on scene shortly after the accident, meeting with state representatives, state of Colorado representatives, and others. And EPA acknowledged responsibility for the release. However, the costs that were incurred and damages that were incurred were later denied.
All right, so we entered into negotiations then with the federal government. Then the settlement came after really intense negotiations. We both sat in on a couple of them, and they were very intense with the federal government. Can you characterize how those went over the course of the years that was going on?
So initially, the state's goal was to recover its response costs for responding to the release and doing all of the emergency response and water testing to make sure that surface waters weren't contaminated, that areas where animals were grazing weren't exposed to the contamination, and that sort of thing.
Right, and the water flowed from Colorado and into Utah and into ultimately Lake Powell.
That's correct. It flowed into the San Juan River. And so the San Juan River, there are areas where, obviously recreation occurs. There's some irrigated agriculture, and there are some livestock operations. So the immediate concern was making sure that, individuals that were boating on the San Juan River or otherwise recreating weren't exposed to the water as it came through, that irrigated agriculture wasn't impacted, and that surface water not be used as drinking water. So there was an effort made to literally truck in water to substitute for drinking water in the area. So substantial costs were incurred. And the original goal was to recover the costs and then to negotiate with EPA so that the state of Utah would have a seat at the table to determine how the remedial action that was taking place in the mining districts would occur so that future contamination and releases wouldn't impact the waters in Utah.
So what damage remains? What remains from the spill still exist in Utah, and how does the settlement cover it?
Well, ultimately, all of the contamination from the Gold King mine blowout ended up in Lake Powell. That's the terminal drainage for the San Juan River. So all of the sediments and materials that were discharged are and still exist in Lake Powell. The challenge that existed at the time was, in order to eliminate all of the sediments in the San Juan and Lake Powell where it settled out, it would have been necessary to dredge portions of the San Juan and portions of Lake Powell. And the estimated costs for doing that were determined to outweigh the other environmental risks associated with doing dredging, because that would in and of itself cause some damage.
Okay, so they're not going to dredge and they're not going to try to get rid of it permanently. So what's involved in mitigating it, or if you want to use the term cleaning up, what's involved in that?
The decision as far as the materials in Lake Powell and the San Juan are concerned was that a determination was made that these materials would settle in the bottom of the river and in the areas of Lake Powell where it was. It wouldn't be mobilized in terms of being available for exposure to anybody who would be recreating or doing anything else in the river or Lake Powell after it had settled, and that other sediments that naturally flow into the river and Lake Powell would cover those heavy metals and other things that came down.
So how does the use of the settlement money work? Where does it go, and are there other, I understand other mine cleanup projects are kind of involved in?
That's correct.
In that, how does that work?
So during the course of negotiations, it was necessary for the state, as well as the Navajo Nation and the state of New Mexico, to file a lawsuit against EPA, the mine owners, and the contractors to recover damages. And so that lawsuit was filed. It was a multi-state litigation that was consolidated in New Mexico, in the Federal District Court in New Mexico. And as a result of ongoing negotiations that occurred over time, the state of Utah, number one, recovered its response costs, which total about $900,000. And then in terms of settlement with EPA agreed to fund water quality grants to the Utah Division of Water Quality, totaling about $3 million. So these water quality grants are used to implement various protective measures for surface waters in Utah. So we have the water quality grants. In addition to that, the mining companies, there were 3 mining companies that were involved in the litigation, Sunnyside Gold, Kinross Gold, and Harrison Western, who was one of the engineering consultants. And they, in total, contributed about $7 million in cash as a settlement. And that money was used to go into the state litigation fund and the general fund. So that money's gone back into, the state coffers. And then in addition to that, probably one of the more beneficial aspects was that EPA agreed to perform some removal site evaluations in some mines that were similar to the mines in the Bonita Peak region in Colorado, specifically the Mildy Fork and Cardiff Forks in Big and Little Cottonwood Canyon in the mining districts there, the Bower Dump and Tailings area in the Ophir Mining District in Tooele County, and in uranium mining sites in Lisbon Valley in San Juan County.
Okay, so it sounds like mines in general are kind of a liability environmentally because of the toxic substances that exist in those mines. Is there a possibility that another similar accident could happen and may even happen here in Utah?
Well, the difficulty exists with abandoned mine sites. The sites that EPA is investigating in Utah are similar to the mine sites in Colorado in the sense that they're abandoned mine sites. There is no current owner or operator of the mine. Water can seep into these mines and create acid mine drainage, which is really what created the problem in Colorado. So, hopefully the work that's being done in Utah will mitigate any of the problems that were incurred in Colorado. The difficulty in Colorado is that in the Bonita Peak mining district, there is still a substantial amount of water in the tunnels, and they're currently being held. That water is being held back by concrete bulkheads that have been installed in the mine adits, other mine adits, and there really is at this point, no knowledge about how much water may be held behind those physical structures. So EPA is currently evaluating all of that with the Colorado Department of Mining, and hopefully there will not be another release, but it's possible there could be at some point.
Sounds like that's a touchy place, like a little bit of a quagmire waiting there.
It is.
Okay, so I guess to kind of sum things up, it sounds like that if there's agreement that keeping the waste in place at the at the lower levels of the lake and the rivers, it's kind of hard to assess damage if we're just going to leave it there and not dredge it. Is that accurate?
It is accurate. Water quality testing is ongoing. There are sampling stations where water samples are collected and analyzed on an ongoing basis. So, at this point, following the release and the settlement that has occurred, there is no, exposure at this point in time that would create a problem.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, Craig, thanks for giving us some insight into the Gold King Mine incident and the settlement. I guess that wraps up the settlement and the case until they decide to revisit Gold King Mine and try to clean it up again. We'll keep our fingers crossed for that day.
Yeah. The settlement does include a reopener, which would essentially allow us to go back if there were a determination made that there was some sort of problem that hadn't been addressed.
All right. Thank you very much, Craig. Thanks for joining us today on Legally Speaking, and thank you, audience, for joining us. We'll talk to you next time.